Hey, I've been working the last 6 years as a Salesforce developer, and I can tell you that probably one of the best ways you can level up your Apex very fast is by learning Queueables. And in this video, I'm gonna teach you everything about those Queueables that you cannot spell. I cannot spell them. Queueables. I'm gonna teach you everything about them. I'm gonna teach you how they're applied in real world. Okay, so this is our real world and how they're applied there. I'm gonna teach you um, all the scenarios, 90% of the scenarios that you're gonna use the Queueables for. I'm gonna teach you the theory behind it and how they work in Salesforce. And basically, I just assume that you know classes and methods. If you understand classes and methods, you will be able to follow this video. And also, somewhere in the middle of the video, I'm going to include a small quizzes for you to check if you are actually following the video, to check if you can understand what's going on there. And by the end of this video, you will be able to write very good Queueables. You will be able to go and apply it on your job. And as I said, it's probably one of the best ways you can level up your Apex basically like today, right? All the other things that take a lot of time to learn, but Queueables, they're very, very easy to understand, especially on Salesforce, right? They're very easy to understand and you can learn all of that very quick. So what is a Queueable? Queueable, right? So the definition, this is obviously not the official definition, right? But you can imagine a Queueable as something like, hey, Salesforce, I've got a job here, right? I've got here a piece of task that I need to do, and let's call it job. And can you do it? Can you do it? But don't do it right now. I don't really care if it's gonna be done right now in this millisecond. You can do it in a couple of seconds, in a couple of minutes, whenever you have the free resources. Okay? So whenever you have resources. Now, there are a lot of stuff that goes here. Even though it's kind of sounds like a simple concept, it is a simple concept, okay? But before you can actually understand those Queueables, before you can understand them exactly how they work, and before I actually show you the first Queueables, I want you to understand 3 simple concepts, okay? We're not gonna go in detail in those concepts, right? But those are important concepts here, okay? So, those are 3 important concepts that you need to understand before. Transactions, asynchronous Apex in general, the principles of asynchronous Apex, and interfaces. Once you understand those 3 things, understanding Queueables will be incredibly easy, okay? So, because if you look at this definition, you can see that there are a couple of things, like for example, a job, right? A job, this is immediately speaks about asynchronous, right? Then resources, what kind of resources, right? That's about transactions. Okay? So we're gonna cover all of that. So get a coffee, get a tea, open the developer console as always, and let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that you need to understand are transactions. Let me go to the developer console and kind of explain you there on the developer console. Okay, so I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna go to the debug here, and I'm gonna write some code. So you're gonna see me live coding, right? The way I'm gonna be explaining everything in developer console, even though you wouldn't do it in real life in developer console, you would do it somewhere else. But here we are going to do it in developer console because it's easy to show and easy to execute. Okay, so I'm gonna create here a new contact, right? Very simple. New contact, and then I'm gonna fill it out. So contact last name would be equal to Miller. I'm only gonna fill out the default required fields, and I'm gonna insert the contact. Now, when I click here on execute, Salesforce is gonna run this code, obviously, and you can see that there are a lot of things that are happening here, right? There's heap allocation, some statement execution, and all of that we are running, we call a transaction. Okay, so it's important for us to understand. So what is a transaction? Transaction, essentially, if we speak in like very easy terms, right? If we simplify things, we don't want to go and read official documentation. We don't want to go and like, define it academically. What is a transaction? Like in math, you would define some kind of mathematics. No, here, very simple. A transaction is a piece of code, is a piece of execution where Salesforce executes some kind of automation until there's nothing left to execute. For example, in this case, what do you think, how much are we gonna execute? So for example, first, obviously we see this code here, right? So we're gonna start with line number 1. Then we're gonna go into the line number 2, and then we're gonna go into the line number 3. Is that all? No. The answer is no. This was my first question to you. You can write in the chat, what do you think? Is that all that is going to be executed? The answer is no and yes, kind of it depends. So whenever we have an insert statement, this is what we call a DML. DML, right? DML stands for data manipulation. I'm not gonna write it all down. But basically what happens is that we have our Apex code here, right? This is our Apex code. And Salesforce is here. This is the database, right? We can draw it usually like this. It's usually how people draw the database. Not that bad, of course. My drawings are absolutely legendary. Okay, so this is the database. This is Salesforce. Now, what happens when we have this insert statement is that Apex engine takes this contact and actually inserts it into database. Now, in the database, you may have some triggers, right? Or you may have some automation. So if you have here triggers, or you have flows, or you have anything else, what's going to happen is that Salesforce is going to register, okay, you inserted the contact, so I'm going to go and execute triggers. Or I'm going to execute record triggered flow, right? If you're familiar with the flows. So the point is that all of that is being executed in one go, all of this is a transaction. Okay? All of that is a transaction. So the transaction is when we start executing some kind of automation, and then we execute all the way until the end, until there's nothing left to execute. So in this case, if the flow is executed and there's nothing more that is inserted or updated, or some kind of email that is being said, or some Apex that is invoked, then that's going to be it. It's done, right? So all of this, starting from this code all the way to the whatever automation is behind it, all of that is called transaction. Now, if you don't have any triggers, then obviously this is not going to happen, and your transaction is going to stop on executing these lines of code. So it's very simple then. But why I'm telling you about the transaction? Because Queueables, it's important for Queueables, obviously, but what I want you to kind of see in those transactions is that Salesforce puts limits on what can be executed during one transaction. So, for example, you cannot write a code that's gonna run for 50 minutes, right? That would be, Salesforce would say, hey, you know what? This whole transaction is actually running on our servers, right? We have like somewhere like a big server in where's the Texas? Somewhere in the Texas, right? Somewhere there in the middle of the desert with like a lot of solar panels, there's a actual server, and your transaction is running on that server. And Salesforce is like, wait a second, you cannot occupy this whole thing for like 50 minutes. You cannot do that. This is kind of like, we're gonna run out of money if everyone runs for 50 minutes. So what we allow you is only to run for a certain amount of time. Okay, the same type of limits we have for all the other things. You can see it here, right? So if we go to the transaction here, you can see that we have all these limits. So in this case, we used one DML statement out of 150. So in the whole your transaction, you can only have 150 DML statements, which will be insert, update, and all of those, right? We're not gonna go into this. So this is not a video on on this type of things. No, we just discuss what's important for our queueables. Okay, so just keep in mind, just observe this information. Don't try to like go somewhere. Just pay attention to what I'm saying. Just have all of this in mind. Don't try to do anything with this information right now. It's all gonna come into the queueables at the end. Okay, so for now we're kind of just working on the base of understanding of the theory. All right, so we have the transactions. They're pretty straightforward. Now the next thing that we need to address would be, let me mark the transactions. The transactions are done. The next thing that we need to understand is asynchronous apex. Okay, asynchronous apex. It's relatively easy because there's a very finite amount of stuff that we call asynchronous apex. Okay, so I'm gonna just basically write down here what do we have. We have obviously queueables is part of the asynchronous apex. I'm gonna explain what is asynchronous apex in a second. Okay, so we have queueables, we have scheduled, we have future methods, and we have, what else do we have? Badge, kinda. Okay, so badge. Just those 4 things, nothing more. Okay, so it's, you see, it's very straightforward stuff that belongs to the asynchronous. Now, what is asynchronous? Obviously, we have 2 things. We have synchronous, and we have asynchronous. Now, okay. So this is asynchronous. What is then synchronous? What can we do with the synchronous stuff? Well, synchronous is, for example, triggers, flows, depending, right? If you have, let's not go into the like flows, not flows, because then I would need to add here as well to asynchronous. I would need to add like scheduled flows. Doesn't matter, or how they call time-based flows, something around this. So from synchronous, there are like, there's this, then there are like web services, just kind of depends where you put it. But the main thing are triggers, okay? So what's the thing about triggers? Let's say you have a trigger, right? Let's say you have a trigger, and I kind of assume that you'll understand what are the triggers. If you don't, then go into one of my courses, learn about this, or just find some videos on triggers. A trigger, let's say we inserted this contact, right? So we inserted a contact. We have a contact there. Okay. We inserted the contact into the database. This is our database. Okay. This is database. Now, when we insert it in database, there's some kind of automation that can run there on the trigger, right? And we're gonna run this automation. This is a trigger. Now, you know that, for example, the trigger can be set on different things, right? It can be triggered when we inserting something, insert, update, delete, undelete, right? Those are the triggers. I have a separate video on triggers, so if you're not familiar with them, just go into them. Why did I speak about this? Yeah, okay. So we have one of those, insert, update, delete, right? So for example, a way to kickstart a trigger, if we go to a contact, we go to the contacts here, we go to Miller, the one that we inserted, right? We go to the details, and now we update something, right? We update the title, and we can say founder, right? That would kickstart a trigger if you have some on update. Or if we insert a new contact, that will also fire a trigger. Now, what happens is that the trigger will execute in the same transaction. This is what I showed you before, right? It will happen in the same transaction. This is asynchronous behavior. So asynchronous behavior is basically when action A happens, action B happens in the same transaction. Or basically you can think about this at the same time or as the result of the action A. The asynchronous behavior, if action C happens, then after some time, action D is going to happen. For example, a new contact is inserted. In 5 days, this contact should receive an email. Right? So between the action and the next action, there are 5 days of difference. Okay? 5 days. So if we visualize it, right? If we visualize it, then when the contact was inserted, instead of immediately something happening, we would have wait first, and then do the action. And then do the action. Okay? So this is the difference between synchronous and asynchronous. Another example from a real world. This, if you have a Zoom meeting and you have some issue, right? You discuss this problem with your colleagues. This is a synchronous way of dealing with the stuff, right? So you go on Zoom and all of you there are discussing something together, right? Discussing something together, you're looking at the screen and you're like, yeah, we have something there, blah, blah, blah. You do this ticket, you do this ticket. Doesn't matter. So you're all together and at the same time, you're kind of discussing something. This is kind of what we would call synchronous communication. And asynchronous communication, this is when this is you. This is you. And this is Maria. And you're sending to Maria an email. Hey, can you do that? Can you do something? And Maria is from Europe. So she says, you know what? I am on the 30 days holiday. So I'm gonna do your stuff when I'm coming back. Okay, so I'm gonna do whatever job you give me. I'm gonna solve it in 30 days. Right? This whole email, this is what we call asynchronous communication. So the email, that would be asynchronous. Asynchronous, right? If you understand this, I know that I'm kind of speaking a lot about this synchronous and asynchronous, but queueables are part of the asynchronous process, okay? So this is, if we go back to this definition that I did, is that I'm saying here, okay, I have a job to do, but it's not that important, so do it whenever you have the resources. We'll speak about the resources in a second. But the point is that you give a job for Salesforce to do, and this job is not going to be done immediately, it's going to be done a little bit later. Okay. Now, another important concept here is that Salesforce can do, and this is so important that I'm even going to write it down. Salesforce can do one thing at a time, one action at the time. This is very important. Always keep it in mind. If you have 2 triggers, 2 different flows, and they all fire at the same time, Salesforce is not going to execute anything in parallel. In comparison to other programming languages, we don't have any parallel execution in Salesforce. We only can execute one action at a time. So always keep it in mind. Whatever code you have, always only one thing can be running. Okay? So we have now asynchronous Apex. We have this done. Now I'm going to show you interfaces. Now, interfaces is kind of like a big topic which we can go and discuss maybe in a separate video or something. Write in the comments if you want to have a separate video on interfaces and inheritance. It kind of frequently goes together with the inheritance. I don't think that those topics are that important for you to be a good Salesforce developer in the beginning. Obviously, if you want to be a senior Salesforce developer, you need to understand them, right? But if you're just learning Queueables, I think we can just discuss interfaces on a superficial level. We don't need to go deep into them. They're pretty easy. So it's just literally 5 minutes of explaining, and then we can go into the Queueables, okay? So what are interfaces? Let me go back here. Okay, interfaces. Very easy. Interface is just, come on, write it. Interface, list of methods. That's all. Very simple. Interface is just a list of methods. Obviously, there's something behind it. I'm going to show you. I'm going to write some code. But when we speak about methods, which I have a separate video about, so if you don't know methods, watch that first. Methods. What are only 3 things that you need to know about methods to define any method in Apex? Think about when you're writing a method, you're always writing something public, let's say string get name, right? And string last name, first name, something like this. This is just an example of a method, right? What you see here is that to define a method, doesn't matter what's inside of the method. To define any method in Apex, you need 3 things. You don't really care about this public or not, but you need return type, okay? You need name, and you need parameters. Those 3 things, if you can define those 3 things, you can define any method in Apex. Or better to say, through those 3 things, you can describe any method in Apex. And interfaces, they use only those 3 things to describe the methods. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. I'm gonna go and let's see if I can, no, not a trigger, I don't need a trigger. I just need a new Apex class. I'm gonna call it A, okay? Doesn't really matter. I'm gonna change it to interface, and I'm gonna define what I wrote before, right? So I'm gonna say string get first name, and here I'm gonna write string last name. And now you would usually do like this, right? And you would start writing the method. But now, instead of that, I'm gonna put a semicolon here. And you're like, what's going on here? Well, we have all the 3 things that we need to define a method in Apex, right? We have the return type, we have the name, and we have the parameters. Now, so how do we use it? What's the point? Okay, let me show you. I'm gonna create a new Apex class called B. Okay, and what this class is gonna do is it's gonna implements A. Now, if I try to save now this class, what I'm gonna see is that Apex does not allow me to save this. Okay, Apex, you can see it here, now you can. It says that class B must implement the method a.getFirstName, and then puts the parameters here. So basically, I cannot define a new method, a new class that implements the interface. So what it does, it forces me to actually have this method inside of my class B. So the interface is the way to force people to have certain methods inside of certain classes. I'm going to show you how it's important in a second, right? We're almost done with this, right? Now let's implement it. Now when we implement it, now we need to say it's a public, global, or not. Public string get first name, and then string last name, doesn't really matter, name, doesn't matter what's the name of the parameter, just important it's a string parameter. System.debug name. Okay, like this. Now, if I'm gonna save it, it's all gonna work. Let's see, saving. Why is it not missing return? Oh, I don't have return. Okay, let me just return this thing. Return like this. See, it doesn't really matter what's the implementation inside of the method. I'm just showing you here different examples. Okay, now I can save it. Okay, it's quite important, so I'm gonna screenshot this. And now if we wanna kind of run it, then we can obviously say something like this, right? And now we can use this method just as the normal method. But let's try to do this. Right, so we're gonna create a new instance of this class. If we execute this, it's gonna say type cannot be constructed. So the interfaces, their whole purpose of interfaces is just to list methods. That's all. Interfaces literally here, you list the methods, and you would list here a lot of different methods, right? Not only one, depending how many you want, right? So you can define there as many methods as you want. I'm gonna just leave it for one. Now, if we visualize this thing here, we have first we have A, right? We have A, and then we have B, and this B, this is what we call implements, like this, and then we say that this thing implements like this, right? That's usually the way you would put it on the visually. Now, you know for sure that this method B is going to have all methods that are defined in A. Now, the question is, why would we even need this whole interface thing, right? Now, imagine you're a Salesforce. You're a Salesforce, and you have created certain functionality. For example, queueables. For example, batch, scheduled, triggers, whatever, right? You created a certain functionality, and you say that you can use this functionality. We're gonna allow you to use the queueables. We're gonna allow you to use our functionality. We're gonna allow you to use many different things in the way you want, but we need to be able to call the classes. Okay? In this way, they can create an interface and they can say, okay, if you want to use queueables, you have to implement the queueable interface. I'll show you what it means in a second, okay? It will be a little bit more clear. So this is the whole purpose of interface. As I said, they're pretty easy. Don't get hung up on the interfaces. You can, if you understand approximately what's going on, it's already good. Okay, so now before we go to the actually queueables and we're gonna write some queueable and we're gonna write some code there, the first quiz, write in the chat, write in the comments the answer to this question. What is asynchronous execution? Okay, I'm gonna be reading all the comments, so write in the comments just to make sure that you actually followed all of this. What is an asynchronous execution in Salesforce? Maybe give an example, maybe give some real world example, maybe give some example from Salesforce, from Apex, but write something in the comments so I know that you are actually following what I'm teaching you. Okay, so we're done with this. Now, we're done with basically also interfaces. Inheritance, obviously, we're not going to be discussing. So we're done with all of this. We're done with this. So congrats, you're done with the kind of theory part that's gonna set you up to understand queueables easily. Okay, very easy. Okay, so what is a queueable? Now, we can kind of discuss it. I already told you that a queueable is kind of like, hey, here I have a job, go do it when you have time. Now, there are different ways how you can visualize this and how you can think about this, but from just the name of the queueables, you can kind of see that there is a name queue, which is the worst English word you can ever imagine, because I have no idea how to spell it. I'm probably gonna make mistakes all the time. So you have a word queue in there, which should be just one word, one letter actually in English, but whatever. So we have these queueables, which means that there's some kind of queue. So a queueable, what it does is that it creates a new job. Let me click this. I'm gonna go back to that drawing in a second, right? So what it does is that it creates a new job. One. What happens is that we can execute only one thing at the time. Remember, so we can only execute one process at the time in Salesforce. Okay, so we have this place, these resources that we can execute, only one thing at a time. And what Queueable does, it creates a new job, a new transaction, and puts it into the queue. So for example, I'm gonna take this out. We create the first Queueable job. We say, hey, I have job to do here, but don't worry. We don't care when we're gonna do it. And then we say, hey, you know what? I have another one to do. Hey, I have another one to do. So the first one that's gonna be executed is job 3. Then we are like, oh, okay, so there's more. We are waiting till this one is executed. And then this one is executed. And Salesforce is like, yeah, nice. Okay, this one is done. Who's next? Okay, you're next. Okay, good. Now job 2 is executed. Nice. Now job 1. Okay. And this is the kind of the essence of the Queueable. It's very simple because you're already familiar with the concept. Imagine you're standing in a queue. I'm gonna be showing my... okay, this, they have a phone here, right? So, I don't know what's going on with my drawing skills. So, we have here our people that are standing in the queue. Standing in the queue to get tickets. For Taylor Swift. Okay. Okay. And someone is selling them. So obviously, when you're the first person here to get the tickets for Taylor Swift concert, first you're gonna be produced. First you're gonna be handled, right? So the first people, you're very familiar with this. It's just normal queue. Who's the first that gets the tickets first? Okay, so this person gets the tickets, but the ticket person, right, only can give one ticket at a time. They cannot just like go and like tickets to everyone. No, they have to get your money, give you credit card, right? Get you the ticket. So first, this person is gonna be done. And then this person is like, ooh, nice, I'm happy, I'm done. And then the second person is gonna go in. Okay, and then that person is done. Oh, nice, let's go. And then the another person is gonna go in, right? So this is the principle of the queue, and the same thing happens in Salesforce because only one thing can be executed at the time. Okay, let me move this one. Now, let's actually write a queueable, right? I'm gonna go back to this drawing in a second, when we're gonna speak about what are the real world applications of Queueable. So I'm gonna create here a new class, and let's call it Queueables examples, for example. Doesn't really matter. Now, if we want to be able to use Queueables and this whole functionality of creating new jobs and these jobs being executed one by one, if we want to be able to do that, we need to implement a Queueable interface. Implements Queueable. Now you can see that we run into the same problem. I'm gonna make it here so you can read it. We ran into the same problem. When we try to implement the Queueable interface, Salesforce is gonna say, hey, you know what? If you implement an interface, you have to implement the methods inside. And that makes sense. If you think about this, your Salesforce, you're trying to design this whole system with queues and all of this, right? You're trying to design the system. Now, you need somehow to be able to execute those jobs and to understand when do you use Queueables? When we expect from Salesforce to be using Queueables versus when we expect to be using just normal Apex, right? Because normal Apex does not behave in this way. So we need to kind of be able to differentiate between those two things as a Salesforce. So Salesforce says to us, okay, I have this awesome Queueable functionality here. If you want to use it, you have to implement the Queueable interface. Okay? Now, implementing a Queueable interface is very simple because the only thing you need is public void execute, and then here you just need to have a system dot Queueable context variable. Now, what's going on inside doesn't really matter for Salesforce, right? So system dot debug hi from queue, like this. There's only one method. So now, because we define this method, Salesforce knows that first of all, we want this class to behave in the asynchronous manner, and we want it to be a queueable, right? And when we're gonna be instantiating this class, I'm gonna show you how to do it. Salesforce knows what kind of method to call in this class so that it works as a queueable. Okay, and obviously here we can have as many classes, as many methods as we want, right? We can write our own methods, and usually you would have many different methods. But this method, it has to be there. It is required, right? Otherwise, if you don't have this method, you won't be able to save your class that implements a queueable. And if you don't have this implements queueable, then you won't be able to use your class as a queueable. Okay, so that's absolutely a requirement. Every queueable has this method. Okay, now how do you actually execute a queueable, right? So first of all, the way you would execute the normal class, right? Let's do it like this. I'm gonna call it queue. It's called just queue. So I don't need to spill all of that. In real world, you would need to write the whole sentence, right? What your queueable, like what's the purpose of your queueable. But in this case, just for the video, so it's not 30 hours, we're not gonna be coming up with this. Now, if you just execute it like this, right? It will execute as a normal class. So I'm gonna execute this. Execute, I need to pass something inside, obviously. I need to pass the context. We'll speak about the context variable a little bit later. But now if I just execute this thing, then if we go to the logs, right, we will be able to see that, okay, there are some logs and it says hi from queue. Okay, now I'm gonna put here system.debug and I'm gonna say hi from an anonymous window. Okay, hi from anonymous window. Click on execute and debug only, right? And we see both of them. Now, this is not how you execute Queueable in the asynchronous way. What I showed you is the synchronous way, right? We're clicking on execute and the whole code is executing in one transaction. This is synchronous execution, okay? Now I'm gonna show you how do you execute. And also, you would never execute Queueable in this way because why would you need a Queueable then, right? You can just have a normal class. What you want to have is the asynchronous execution, and this is the whole reason why we are discussing this thing, right? In this, to do it, we have system dot and then enqueue job here, and then we pass there the queueable inside, the queueable variable. So now I'm going to click on execute, and if I spelled it correctly, then we're going to be able to see two things. So you can see that the previous one we executed, right, it was at 40, now there's at 41. Now you can see that at 41, we have two different logs, which means we have two different transactions. So what happened is that the queueable, it created a new transaction. And this is the whole purpose of the queueable. So now if I click here on anonymous window, I click on the debug only, we're going to see hi from anonymous window. But we don't see hi from queue, because hi from queue was executed in a different transaction, in this one. Now here, if I click on the debug only, I'm going to see hi from queue. You can see those are two different transactions. Okay? They're not that different. I'm going to show you what's kind of combines them together. But this is a different execution. You can kind of think about this in this way. Now, this is very important. So let me show you what's going on there, right? So I'm gonna have this thing here like this, and I'm gonna put it here. Gonna make it bigger. Hey, to make it bigger. Okay. Let's go here. So you can see that we have, let's go on the right. So we have, let's go on the left. Let's go on the left. So we have a little bit more space. What's going on? Wait. 1 second. What's going on here? Okay. So I struggled with this screenshot, but I have it now here. So what's going on here? First, we have this Apex. Okay. When you click on execute, what's going to happen is that it's going to execute this 3 lines of code synchronously. Right? So this happens synchronously. Now, when we hit this line number 2, what's going to happen is that Salesforce is going to create a new job. That's why it's called enqueue job. Job basically means, let's say it like separate transaction, okay? So it creates a new job. Now, question to you. This is the question that can be on Platform Developer 1 or Platform Developer 2. Will this job execute before line 3? Okay, before this line 3, or after the whole code, after the line 3, after line 3, after this whole code? Write it in the chat, and I'm gonna give you the answer. Okay, so write it in the chat? There's no chat. Write it in the comments. What the hell? What is the chat? So write it in the chat. Now the answer is that your Queueable is going to execute after this whole code is done, because the asynchronous execution happens after the synchronous code is finished. This is important to keep in mind, okay? If we go back to this, where was it? Yeah, if we go back to this painting, you can see that we only have one thing that we can execute at a time, right? Remember, I told you this is important. You can only execute in Salesforce one transaction at a time. So now if you created a new job, the only thing it does, it gets put in the queue, and it waits until the current thing that you're executing is done, and only once it's done, we're gonna start with the executing of that job. So the Queueable that you put here will only run after your whole code is executed. So even though it's on the line number 2, it's not gonna execute on the line number 2 somehow in parallel or in between the lines. And it's important to understand and to keep in mind, okay? Hope you answered that correctly, okay? So that was my quiz number 2 for you. Okay. So the system.enqueue job, you always use it to produce a new job, basically, okay? Now, let's go to this drawing. This is one I'm gonna show you this more in detail, how they're used in triggers, for example. But this is one of the most frequent ways how Queueables are used. We have an action, doesn't matter what. In this example, account is inserted, okay? We have then some kind of trigger that's happening, yeah? We have the trigger. And then we run some code, maybe trigger handler, maybe something else, maybe we run the trigger framework, or it's just done, doesn't matter. So we have our synchronous execution, okay? We have our synchronous execution. Now, sometimes we want to perform some actions in the asynchronous way. For that, we would use a queueable, right? And then we create this new job, for example, send an email, and then update the same account. And this thing, we say, hey, this is not very important for me to do it in the same transaction. Just do it whenever you have the resources. And this is where you would use a queueable with the asynchronous execution. Okay. So this is what the queueables are. I hope that this gives you a really good understanding what are the queueables. You can see that in the essence, they're very simple to understand. There's nothing special about them. It's just basically a new job. It's very easy. Now, the real-world application of them is what I showed you right now. We're going to understand by the end of the video. Is a little bit more complicated, but I'm still going to show you what's going on there, okay? So, before we go there are a couple of different things about this queueable. So, I want to show you what happens if one of the transactions fails, right? This is kind of why we also need to have queueables. Okay, so let's say we have here integer a equal to 1 divided by 0, which is clearly an error, right? You cannot divide 1 by 0. In Apex, it's going to produce an error. So if we run this code, question to you, what do you think? How many transactions we're going to see? Gonna click on execute. Okay, it says divide by 0, but we had here the queueable. Now, if we look at our data here and our logs, then we don't see a queueable. Why is that the case? Why don't we see a queueable here? Because the whole transaction is rolled back. It's important to understand, okay? So we're gonna take a little bit of time to understand all that. So what do I have there? So first of all, I have a queueable, right? So queueable variable created. Then the next thing, I have enqueue job, right? So I put a new job in the queue. Then I have system debug, and then after that I have error, right? So that's how it goes, right? So variable, enqueue, debug, and then we have an error. Doesn't matter which kind of error, just give me here an example of any error. Okay, we have an error here. Now, this enqueue job, go a bit more down. This enqueue job, obviously, it's gonna produce a new job, right? It's gonna produce a new job, and let's call it job 1. But remember what I told you? This job only is going to be executed after, okay? Like this. They're all executing in the synchronous way, but this job is going to be executed after the synchronous execution because it is waiting in the queue to be executed, okay? It's waiting, yeah, so I will execute whenever this whole execution is done. So it is kind of tied to that execution. So when this execution here, when this execution fails, it also fails this whole queueable, so it doesn't even run. So everything is rolled back. If you know anything about Salesforce transactions, you know that they are rolled back. So they're all rolled back when some kind of error happens in Apex code. So that includes our queueable. The queueable is gone. The queueable is not going to be executed. Okay? Now, see what happens when we invert the situation. When we go here to developer console, I'm just gonna move this error away from here, and I'm gonna put it here inside. Okay, I'm gonna click on save. And now I'm gonna click execute. Suddenly it runs. It runs, and we see 2 different logs, which means there are 2 different transactions. Okay, so you can see that here we have hi from anonymous window, and here we have hi from queue, but this one fails with an error. Yeah, divide by 0 here, Now, why does it work the other way around? This is strange, right? But if you look at this visualization, that it's not strange at all. What happens is that this whole synchronous execution finishes properly. It's already done. It's already committed to database. It's already done, doesn't care. Now, because this is a new job that is getting executed basically from scratch, there's new set of limits, there's new set of rules that applies to this, and it says, yeah, okay, so I'm done with this one, I'm gonna execute this one now. And now when this fails, it doesn't cause the whole chain to fail. And this is one of the very important concepts. Why do we even have those queueables? Because what we can do is that we can create a job, and then if this job fails, it will have absolutely no influence on the main execution. It is very important to understand this, okay? This is one of the core features of the queueables. This is one of the core reasons why do we want to actually have queueables? Why do we want to use them? Let's say you have a trigger, right? Let's say you have a trigger. So let's go back to this example, right? So you have a trigger. Now here, you wanna from the trigger. Let me give you this example, okay? So we have a trigger. Now after the trigger, you execute your main stuff that you need on the platform itself, right? So for example, you might have trigger handler or service. Doesn't really matter. You have like your stuff. Now you have a server. Just a third-party server. Doesn't have anything to do with the Salesforce. Hey, come on. Trying to make you come on, work. Yeah, here we go. Server. Doesn't have anything to do with the Salesforce, okay? Some server that prints t-shirts. Doesn't matter. just an example. Now you will execute. Okay, so again. So you have the account, right? The trigger works, the trigger fires, right? It's important for you that this transaction actually works, right? Because based on that, there's some automation inside, some automation that you actually want to have. Now, what happens here with the server is that sometimes the server doesn't work. Sometimes it just goes down for whatever reason, right? Maybe the electricity went out or whatever. So if you make a request to the server and it does not respond, it says, I'm out, cannot reach me, okay? If this whole thing would cause this whole transaction to fail as well, that would be kind of stupid. You don't want to do that, right? Because one thing doesn't have anything to do with another, right? They're separate. They're logically separate. They're also separate by the way we are writing code. So what you want to do is that this communication, you want to put it out into a queueable. And then if that queueable fails, then that doesn't have much influence on your main thing that run there, okay? So in this queueable, you would put something that can actually fail, and it doesn't have that much of influence. It is not that important. Okay, this is one of the ways to use it, right? We're gonna discuss. I'm gonna show you how to use it in triggers, and I'm gonna show you how to use it with the callouts, which are probably those two cases. They cover like 90% of use cases in the real world for queueables. Before we do that, there's another thing about limits, right? So I have here a nice limits. So I'm gonna go in the queueable and I'm gonna write this thing here, right? I'm gonna show you basically how many DML statements we used, right? And let me insert here, just insert a new contact. Don't do it in real life like this, like I'm doing right now. But that's just a quick way to do some limits here. Okay. So I'm gonna insert Miller Q1 and Miller Q2. you can see that first I'm going to insert it and then I'm going to create a queueable, right? And then inside of the queueable, I'm checking, okay, how many limits did I use? And I'm going to also check how many limits I used in the main synchronous transaction. Okay, execute, let's see. So this is our main transaction here. How many limits used? I used 1 out of 150. In the queueable, I still used 1 out of 150. Even though we have two different DML statements, okay? So you have one DML, you have second DML. Let's add a system debug here in the main transaction also to see it after. In the main transaction, you can see there's still 1 out of 150. So no matter what you do, the queueable, because it's a new transaction, they're going to have a new set of limits. This is also a nice way to kind of like work around those things and to see that you, if you're close to the limits, you can offload into the queueable something that is computational heavy, and then it can do this thing what you want. Now, we have covered so much in under 1 hour. Very quick, what I also want to cover before we go into more like real world applications is futures. If you go back here, you can see that futures is one of the asynchronous things, okay? And let's have a look what Salesforce Trailhead writes about it. So it's as usual, there's a lot of on Trailhead, there's a lot of blah 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 blah. But here's what they write: because queueable methods are functionally equivalent to future methods. Doesn't matter what they write after. Okay. So they write that queueables are the same as futures, and this is true. Queueable is the same as future method, but a future method does everything worse. Future methods are bad. Don't use future methods, okay? So there's probably one use case for the mixed DML statements in tests where you would actually want to use the future method. Literally only one. In all the other cases, whenever you want to have this kind of job 1, job 2, queueable, chaining jobs, anything else, always use queueable, okay? This is important. Just keep in your mind, always queueable, no matter what, queueable, because queueable is way better than futures. I forbid you to use futures, okay? Of course, you're gonna see it a lot. You're gonna see it on the internet. You're gonna see it in the Trailhead. But if you were working for me, you were writing code, and you wrote a future method, I would ask you, why would you even do that if you can do a queueable? Now, there's some considerations, like futures are a little bit more lightweight. Yes, they're lightweight, but they're also a big pain to work with. So in general, I don't like having any futures in my projects at all. They also, Salesforce says here some kind of reasoning, why would you use a future? Because it's easier. It is not easier. It is not easier to use futures against queueables. Okay, so we covered this one. So please always use future No. What did I say? No. Always use queueables. That's the rule. Okay, so now also a couple of things about queueables that just make your real life working with queueables a little bit easier. And first is that you can actually query them. So you can actually see them with using SOQL queries, and you can see them also in the setup, right? So here I can query them and I can see completed, failed, right? So I can see the status, I can see the created date, I can see the IDs. So this is important that each queueable that you create is going to have an ID assigned to them, right? This is going to be important later with the testing, but in general, this is how you can just see what's going on with them. Also, you can get this ID by assigning, so let me delete all of this blah blah thing. Here you can get here ID and QID like this, and I'm gonna print it out QID like this. So I'm gonna execute and debug only, And what the hell is that? This is wrong. Hey, what's going on? Ah, wait. Okay, I'm opening the Queueable itself, right? Okay, so here's the ID. You will be able to see this ID, and this ID will correspond to the Queueable. Sometimes I will show you later why you would need it, but that's more like for testing purposes. And in general, it makes just if you want to query and see what's going on with your Queueable, was it completed, was it done, was it not done, then you can use this ID. Also, you can, if we go here to the setup, okay, so here you can go to the, okay, so you can see there is a flex queue. Let's go there. Now, this is not the Queueables, but Apex jobs, this is the Queueables, okay? So, yeah. Now, in the Apex jobs, you're gonna have multiple different jobs, so it's not only Queueables gonna be there. Can be also, for example, batch. Okay, so this basically, so far what we had, it explains to you what are the Queueables. But I also want you to I want to show for you the real world application of them and how we can apply them. So far, if you have watched it, you already understand what are the Queueables, and I hope that your Apex is already way better than when we started. You understand way better what's going on. But now I want to show you how to apply the Queueables to solve some of the problems that we have in Salesforce, and that ties a little bit to integrations and triggers. So from now on, I expect that you understand what are the triggers, what are the integrations. If you don't know what are the integrations, you have a link below to go and like in 60 minutes finish what are the integrations. It's very easy to understand. And after that, come back and you will understand how to tie it with the triggers. So now let's go and create a simple trigger, okay? So first of all, I have here, this is from my integration mini course. If you haven't done it, I really recommend you. It's like super easy. You can do it in the evening and you will understand what's going on here. But very quick to bring you up to speed. This is an endpoint that we have. Second, what's going on here? Okay, so this is endpoint that we have. We are getting here something from that endpoint, and we're getting a link for the payment, right? So for example, we have some person that wanna buy a course on integrations on Queueables, for example, and we're getting the payment link for that person from Stripe or from the PayPal. So this is just very simple. The only thing we do with this link is just displaying it, right? So let's say we want to do it whenever we got a new contact. So we have a new contact, the new contact is inserted into the system, and then we want to get the link and we want to write this link into the contact itself, right? Very simple use case. So let me visualize this use case, okay? What's going on here? Okay, so contact created. Why is it so small? Contact created. Okay, after the contact is created, we want to get the link and then write link into a field. Any field, I don't really matter. This doesn't really matter. I don't care. Any field, right? So this is the process that we want to have. Now, how do we get a link? A link we get from a server. In this case, PayPal, Stripe, or any other payment system. Any other payment system. Okay, we get the link back. Okay, we request, and then we get the response with the link. Response with the link. So pretty easy, nothing crazy, just a normal, very simple integration. Now, you already know what I told you before, that is gonna have some complications. I'm gonna explain you what are the complications and how we can avoid it using Queueables. But first, I'm gonna be naive. I'm gonna say, okay, let's implement this trigger directly. Obviously, we're not going to be using any trigger handlers or trigger frameworks because this is not about triggers. So in real life, you would use triggers, trigger frameworks, trigger handlers at least. Now we're just going to smash everything into one trigger. We don't really care, just for the illustration purposes. Okay, so now I'm going to create a new Apex trigger on a contact. Let me check if I have already a trigger there. Open. Do I have any triggers? No, this is a fresh org. Okay, nice. So I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna say, no, not the class. Not the class. Trigger. A new Apex trigger. Okay. Contact, trigger, and it's gonna be on the contact. Where are you, the contact? Here we go, contact. Submit. Before insert, right? Now, I expect that you already know what's going on here. So I'm gonna just, for now, I'm not gonna even bulkify it, just because the purpose of this video are queueables, okay? Not, let's bulkify it. Let's bulkify it. Let's not show you very bad practices. Let's bulkify it. Okay, so for contact from trigger.new, right? For each of the contacts, we're gonna make one request. Okay, we're gonna get a payment link, and then where are we gonna save it? That's the question. Where are we gonna save it? Let's see. Description. Description is a good one. So we're gonna save it in the description. So, contact description equal to payment link. Like this. Again, I don't really care about particulars of this whole thing. What I want to show you is how to combine the integrations, how to combine triggers and queueables together, right? Because this is probably 90% of applications for queueables. Okay, so we have some kind of integration here. Now, it was saved. Looks good. What's the problem, right? Let's try to insert a new contact. I'm gonna go here, new contact, and I'm gonna say Miller integration. Yeah, save. Oh, okay. Execution before insert. Callout from triggers are currently not supported. Why, Salesforce? Why don't you support callouts from triggers? This is a big thing that actually I, as a Salesforce developer, when I was a junior Salesforce developer, I could not understand. What's the problem of making HTTP call out from a trigger? Why? What's the problem? Okay. Now the problem needs a little bit of explaining, and then you will understand why Salesforce decided not to support it. This is an action, right? So this is a contact. Okay, we have a contact. We are inserting this contact into the system, okay? And this is time. Here, you have this server, right? Or any HTTP where you make the callout. Okay, so we are inserting the system. Okay, insert. Now, I'm gonna make a callout request to the server. Okay. Now, what's going to happen is that this server is gonna accept the request for the payment link, for example, right? I'm asking for the payment link. It's gonna accept the request, and it's gonna wait. Not wait, but it's gonna process this whole thing. We're gonna wait. We are waiting until it processes this whole thing. We are waiting, and at some point, we're gonna get a response. But this whole waiting can take a freaking lot amount of time. It can be, I'm not sure, I think the default is like 120 milliseconds, something around this, which is a huge amount of time in terms of the execution. All the executions in Apex that I showed you so far happening within a millisecond, okay? So it's like 100 times longer. And remember that Salesforce can execute at any given moment only one thing. Only one thing can be executed. So all of this time, we are going to be waiting and blocking all the other things. We are blocking. We cannot execute anything else, and we haven't finished this transaction that we started. So this why Salesforce said, okay, you know what? When you're inserting something into the system, it immediately blocks like a certain part of the database. And if you're going to be waiting for the other server to respond to you for minutes, for a couple of minutes, you will not be able to run anything else in the database. It's not that dramatic, but for the simplification. So we want you not to do that. We want you not to block everything. So if you want to have a request, please do it using queueables. So create a queueable here and let the queueable communicate with the server and let the queueable wait and let the queueable execute whenever we have free resources. And that simplifies the whole execution. That simplifies how basically it removes this whole blocking thing, okay? So this blocking, we're not blocking anymore, right? We're executing our triggers synchronously. So we know that all our triggers that are gonna be executed, they will be executed fast, right? Because imagine if you have like 100 people working in Salesforce system, right? You'll always have some kind of triggers firing here and there, right? You'll have a lot of complexity. You don't want someone, like one person, blocking the whole thing for a minute so that then another person can click and block. So this is why from the triggers you cannot make any callouts. Okay. So the solution is to use queueables, what I showed you. So create a queueable here and let this queueable communicate. Let this queueable being blocked, because we are executing this queueable only when there's no triggers running, only when we can be executing it, right? Obviously, it's not going to be that dramatic. It's probably not going to be like minutes. But still, this is kind of the idea behind it. Why? Okay. Now, how do we make it work? Because from here, there's not a way you can make it work. If you have any kind of HTTP request, you cannot make it work by making like direct callouts in triggers. So what you need to do is that you need to create a queueable class, right? Likely that we have already one open. Classes. Where's the queueable examples, right? We already have a queueable one. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna put all of this into execute. Okay. Now, to make a callout from a queueable, you also need database allow callouts. Okay. Wait, what allow callout? Is it allow? Allows callouts. Okay, so it's allows and callouts. Okay, good. Value cannot be stored in type contact. Yeah. We're gonna handle this one in a second. So now we need to find a way to pass those contacts, right? But one thing that I actually didn't tell you about is that if you want to use this, you can, by the way, you can use this whole thing. You can use this this call out as well if you want to have like a quick demonstration. It's a very simple one. Let me show you what it does. If we go there, it just delivers you this JSON here, right? Again, this I kind of assume that you know this because this is from my free mini course on integrations. So it's gonna help you. Go do this course. It's a very nice one. You can like solve it in you can just read it in 60 minutes. Okay, it's less than this whole video. So if you want to use this, you need to add it to the remote settings. Okay, so this is one thing that I kind of did not explain to you, right? So you need to add it here to the remote settings. If you have this, you will be able to just copy whatever code I have. Okay, so we have this. Now, obviously, we can care about the contact a bit later. Let me just comment it out because we just have a call out. Now we're gonna care about the contacts. So, okay, now here we can actually instantiate a Queueable, right? For now, just forget about this. So I'm gonna be saying Queueable examples Q equal to the new Queueable, okay, like this, and system dot enqueue job Q, like this. Okay, gonna click save. Yeah. Now, if I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna click on save again. Ta-da! The trigger works. Right, so we're making a call out from a trigger. We're not really saving here into the description anything, right now, because we don't have them connected. But what we have done right now is that we solved this problem where we cannot make a call out from a trigger. Okay, so we solved this problem. Now, how do we actually pass the context inside? This is another topic that is important for real world scenarios. It is not something that is prescribed, not something that you would be able to find in Salesforce documentation. But this is a way to use Queueables that I personally, after working 6 years as a Salesforce developer, I found this way kind of the best way to work with Queueables. So this is kind of the way that I enforce. In a lot of cases, what you will do with the Queueables is that you will have a Queueable here, right? So let's create here a Queueable. You'll have a Queueable here, and you'll have a trigger. And this Queueable is gonna go and call like a server, right? So now from this trigger, you usually would need to make this call out here based on some kind of information from the trigger, right? So for example, in our case, we want to have some information from the contacts. Where are we gonna save the link, the payment link? Where are we gonna save it? Okay, we're gonna save it in the contacts. Okay, how do we get the contacts? Now you have two ways. The first way is, of course, you can just pass all the records as objects. You can pass the records there. This is the first way. Another way, and this is the way I would prefer it, is that you can pass IDs and then query it here inside. Query it inside of the Queueable. This is the way I prefer it. Why? Because if you do it this way, your Queueable becomes a closed system. And this closed system you can use from a trigger or from batch, or from another Queueable. The only thing that you would need to do is to pass the IDs of your records. This makes the Queueable more reusable. That makes it more just better usage for the real world code in general. Okay, so the way we do it is using constructors. Constructors. Okay. Now, your Queueable in those cases, this is now we're going kind of a little bit more into the architecture thing. In those cases, your whole callout won't make any sense unless you have the actual contacts, right? For example, if you want to save a link on the contact, would it make sense for you to make the whole callout without actually having contacts? No. So it means that your Queueable should only run if you have the ID of those contacts, if you have the contacts that you actually want to work with. Okay? So that's where we have Queueables, where we have the constructors as well. Now, this is already a little bit more advanced stuff than just beginners and understanding what are the Queueables. But this is important. I told you, your Apex is going to be 10 times better by the end you finish this video. Okay, so Queueable, how do we pass the IDs? What I would do is that I would create here a private variable, private set of IDs, and I'm gonna call it contacts contact IDs. Contact IDs. I'm always bad in this, contact or contact IDs. Like this. And now I'm gonna have a constructor here, and constructor is going to have those set of IDs. Okay, and we're just gonna fill it out like this. Now, these two things, what they will do is that they will make it impossible for you to instantiate a queueable like this. It will be impossible because it's gonna say constructor is not defined. So if you want to use your queueable that you created, you have to pass IDs of the contacts inside of the queueable. So this enforces basically people to use this in the way you expect them to use, right? That makes your queueable reusable, and that makes them to basically follow your architecture. And now here, I'm gonna have a query contact, right? So I'm gonna have also private list contacts, let's say query contacts by IDs, right? And here depends how we want to use it. Many different architectures you can go. I'm just gonna go for the simplest one. I'm gonna have here a set of IDs, contact IDs, and or maybe I'm just gonna return them immediately. Doesn't really matter. This is just an example, right? We're not going into this whole code architecture. How you would use them just depends heavily on what's your use case exactly. So in this case, I'm just gonna have ID, last name, and description from contact where ID in contact IDs, like this. So very simple query, right? And then what I'm gonna do here is that I'm gonna query those contacts, list contact contacts. Again, you would name them a little bit differently, not just contacts, but this is just a very quick way of doing this. And I'm gonna be using the contact IDs. Okay, the contact IDs, and now we just iterate through these contacts. We say contact from contacts, and we are making those requests for each contact like this. Okay, and now contact dot description, and now we're also gonna update contacts. Update contacts. Now, what you need to be aware of here, that if here we had a trigger that is firing on the update, we might run into the circular updates, right? This is more of a trigger handling, right? This is not so much about queueables. I'm just showing you the complete solution for the queueables. Okay, so we have this. Now here we need to get the IDs. Yeah, the IDs. It's pretty easy to do. I have one trick for that. Okay, so I save it usually in my Notion, and if you have the list of something, you can get start after insert, so you can get the IDs using like this. It's gonna be contact, okay, key set result, contact IDs like this, contact IDs, and now those contact IDs we would pass it here. Okay, now it's all saved. You see there are no errors here, and the code here is also very simple. We are accepting the contact IDs, right? Then we are querying them, and then we are iterating through them to make the callout. We're saving the callout result for each individual contact inside of this contact description field, and then we are updating the contacts, right? So it's pretty straightforward. There's no crazy stuff in there, and we are done with this one, right? So let's see if it works. I might have made a mistake somewhere. That's completely fine. This is live coding, so you'll see. But the point what I'm trying to show you is how to use Queueables in real world scenarios, right? Obviously, we have here some kind of artificial scenario. I'm gonna write Igorio, and I'm gonna click on save. And now in this case, we have a couple of choices. We can either go to the logs and we can see the Queueables here. I can click here and see if they are correct or not, right? So we can see that we definitely have some payments there. So now if we go here to the details, you'll see that first, the description is not updated, right? Because the Queueable is still executing. But then if you refresh, it should be updated unless we've made some mistake. And if we did, then okay, so we didn't, right? So you can see that first there's nothing in the description, and then when you update it, there's going to be a description there with the payment link. This is because this whole thing is asynchronous process, right? So first the trigger is done, and then it takes some time for the Queueable to actually be processed. Keep in mind that Queueables, because we have so much around those Queueables, this whole queue management thing, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about them later, they are kind of expensive to set up, right? So you don't want to just like fire the Queueables all the time. They kind of take quite a bit of processing power in Apex, right? So you do want to kind of be considerable with them. And obviously this is one of those reasoning what people say why you should use futures versus Queueables, but don't listen to them. Queueables are way better. They're way easier to manage. So again, this is how you make a callout from a trigger. And obviously in the real life, you would have all the trigger handlers, all the trigger frameworks that you want. But in the nutshell, this is how you do it, okay? So this is an important part of it. Okay, so basically with the using constructor, we are done with the using constructor, right? So now you know how to use the constructor. We still have two important topics to cover, and then you know everything important about Queueables. We have chaining jobs and we have testing Queueables, right? So for both of those purposes, I'm gonna create a new Queueable because this one is kind of already overloaded a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna go here and new Apex class, and I'm gonna say this is a simple Queueable. Okay, and it implements Queueables. It implements Queueable. Okay, not multiple Queueables, and we have this execute. Okay, we have this execute. Oh yeah, I didn't speak about this this context variable. This is relevant for chaining jobs, for testing jobs. So for now, system.debug here. Hello from Q2. Okay, so this is just a different Queueable that we have there. Now, this context variable, it's quite interesting because probably you're not gonna use it at all. You can think about this as more of a Salesforce like internal thing. If we go and Google actually, we go to the documentation, Apex like this, right? We go there, you can see that, okay, it only has one method. So it's not crazy thing, only just one method, which gets you the job of the ID. So this is not a super important thing here, so you're probably not going to be using it. It does have own usage for example, you might want to have some kind of context about what kind of Queueable are you in for the chaining jobs, but forget about this. You don't care about this. It's not very important. I don't think in my last 6 years as Salesforce developer I ever used this context variable, so forget about this. We don't really care about this. It's not important. Those details, you usually learn them when you need them, and probably you're not gonna need them, so forget about that. We're speaking about chaining jobs in general, right? You can kind of, from just the name, you can already imagine how it looks like, right? So we have like job 1, right? We have job 1, and then there's job 2, and then there's job 3, and they all are executed in kind of like a chain, right? One after another. And this is exactly what it is, right? So that's exactly how it looks like. It's going to be 1, it's going to be 2, and it's going to be 3. Now, before I show you how it works, let me explain where do we actually use it. The example would be polling in integrations. So I'm going to be switching into the adult mode with the integrations. Again, if you want to learn all of that, what is the polling, then welcome to my integration cohort, which is going to start soon. So go and join the integration cohort that I'm running regularly. Okay, so polling is basically you're here in Salesforce, you have another server somewhere else server, and you're making a request. And then the server takes its time to process, right? But instead of just waiting, you're like this annoying kid. You're going always and asking, is it ready? Is it ready? Is it ready? Are we there? Is it ready? Is it ready? Is it ready? Is it ready? And you ask it all the time until the server is like fed up and like, yes, here's your answer. Yes. Yes. Now, this thing, you can implement it with the Queueables. The way you do it is by chaining the jobs, obviously. So we have here our first job, right? Job 1. And this job is going to make a request. Okay? It's going to make a request to the server. Okay, request. Good. Now, this is going to be a server actually. Server. Now, what we're going to do in this job is that we're going to go and see what is the reply. If the reply is okay, that's fine. If the reply is not okay, we're going to create a second job. Going to create a job 2. Okay? The way it looks like is like this. We have, let's say we have some kind of try catch. Doesn't really matter what exactly. There are many different ways. You can have an if statement on the response. You can have a try catch. In this case, I'm just going to have try catch. Try catch. We are catching an exception. Any exception, doesn't really matter. And here, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to put enqueue job, and I'm going to enqueue this Queueable. Like this. Okay? Now, this Queueable here, it's going to retry request in 3 minutes. So this Queueable here, it's gonna say, okay, so the first one didn't get the right response, or it failed for some reason. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna retry it later. I think a better example would be actually, let me go back. Let me go back, give you a little bit more real example, right? So here, for example, here, when you get a payment link, or maybe when you get the response, yeah, you can get, for example, you can have a response and then the status code. If it's not 200, then you retry. Or in this case, I'm going to just go simpler. I'm going to say if payment link is empty, then retry again. Okay? Then instantiate this simple Queueable. And now I'm going to do a trick here. I'm going to put here 3, which means delayed by 3 minutes. So now what's going to happen is that our first Queueable is going to execute, yes, but then it's going to create a new job that's only going to run in 3 minutes. And then this job is going to call the server again and say, hey, maybe something changed. Let me try the request again. Maybe I don't know, maybe you were not responding. Let's try again. This is what we call chaining jobs, okay? Now, one Queueable creates another Queueable. Usually, you would want to have a delay. Sometimes what you can do is that you can even introduce there the increasing delay all the time. So you can say, okay, first it's going to be 1 minute, then it's going to be 3 minutes, then it's going to be 5 minutes, okay? All the time. So you can introduce this, and this is what we call chaining jobs. Now, you use Queueables for that. I showed you the part of the Queueables. Now, it's not very important what's going on here right now. because this is more of a topic for integrations. And if you want to go deeper into all of this chaining and how integrations work, then welcome to my integration cohort as always, right? So this is more of an integration part. From the terms of the queueables, it's pretty simple here what's going on, right? So there's nothing crazy in there. Now chaining jobs, that's done. So I explained it to you what it is. More than that, to understand queueables themselves, you don't need to do. You don't need to know, right? You can create the chaining jobs. You can chain by creating the same queueable. You can even instantiate the same queueable, right? So here you could say system.enqueue job, and now you can again go simple queueable or any other queueable, right? So this is just so you understand the chaining. When you chain the queueables, it means from one queueable you create another queueable. Very simple, nothing more. It's just fancy words for that, for instantiating new queueables. Obviously, pay attention that you don't run into like circular. There's certain stack depth that you can go. There are also other things that you can do. You can kind of see, okay, how many queueables I already have. This is why we have the IDs there. So there's like a whole different world about chaining queueables that is connected to the callouts, actually, not so much to the queueables. So that's why we're not going to discuss it right now too much. Okay, so now we have covered pretty much everything you need to know about queueables. The only one thing is missing is how do you test queueables? This is an important thing. So I'm gonna bring back the system.debug. How do you test it? Well, obviously, first of all, we need to create a new Apex class. I'm gonna call it test, and it's gonna be here. It's gonna be is test, and here it's gonna be add is test. And let me have a look at my notes. Okay. So it's gonna be should be public, doesn't matter. Static void test example. Here we go, right? Okay. So usually what we will do, we'd have test.start test, right? In all the tests. I kind of assume that you already know how to test Apex. Test.stop test. Okay. Then we have assert are equal. Don't use what ChatGPT is using, system.assert. We are not using that anymore. We are using are equal. And that's the usual test setup, okay? Now, let's say we enqueue this queueable. Let's make it do something. Let's make it do something meaningful. Let's go back to the contact example, right? Do I still have it here? No, I don't have it here. So let's go back to the contact example. So contact, new. Let's do it one-liner. New contact. Don't do it in real life, okay? Don't do that in real life. Don't produce bad code. Okay, I'm not gonna be lazy. I'm gonna put it properly for you, okay? Contact, just stay with me. Don't lose the attention, okay? So we have contact last name equal to Miller here, right? And insert contact. Okay, so it does something here, this queueable. Now, to test it, obviously what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna say system.enqueue job, and I'm gonna enqueue there my queueable. As always, you can just put them directly there. You can like this, right? You can do it. You can add the delay here. It doesn't really matter. But in real life, not for the testing, if you write here, you can just always add here on the second place the delay that you want to have. I'm just not sure if it's in seconds or milliseconds actually. Let me see if it's milliseconds or if it's second. Yeah, it's 0 till 10 minutes, right? So what I was explaining here, you can go from 0 till, okay, you can go from 0 till 10. That's what you can do, okay? So this is important. So I think it's in minutes. So you always need to keep attention that it's in minutes. All right, so let's go back to this. In tests, it doesn't really matter what kind of delay. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so now what is it gonna do is it's gonna create a new contact, right? So I'm gonna have created contact equal to select ID last name from contact limit 1. And here I would say that we expect to be Miller, and create contact dot last name should be Miller. Okay, that's what we expect. Now, here's the interesting thing, and this is probably one of the only thing that you need to know about Queueables, is that Queueables run synchronously in tests. That's all. So basically, if you have this system.enqueue, or if you have execute of the Queueable, doesn't really matter. That doesn't make that much of a difference for for Apex tests. Okay. So what I showed you here, this is literally the way you test Queueables. You test for what the Queueable does, okay? Not for if it was instantiated or not, because you kind of know that it's going to be instantiated. It's not up to you anyway, right? It's up to Salesforce to make this whole Queueable thing, to make this whole to make this whole Queueable management. So what you do here is that you literally test what it does. In this case, it inserts a new contact, right? This is what you test. Okay, so let's run this test. Enqueue, so this is simple. I only have one test in this org. Okay, here we go, run, tests, and it failed. Why did it fail? Do not support web service call. Wait, what? Oh, I have, yeah. Yeah. Let's, okay, bear with me. Let's do an account here. An account name, an account, because we have a trigger that goes into there. So testing integrations and testing HTTP callouts, even if they're in Queueables, different topic, okay? Insert contact. Let's see if it's gonna be saved. In the meanwhile, I'm gonna be changing everything here to the account ID name, and account, okay. Let's see why it doesn't save. A value can be stored in name type of contact. Why is it? Account. Has to be account here. Okay, and now we recompile that one and it's all saved. Okay, now let's run it again. This time, I hope it's gonna work. Okay, now it works, right? So as always with tests, no actual Queueable was created. So if you go to the Queueable and you try to monitor them, you won't be able to see anything there. And here we covered all the 100% of the Queueable. So keep in mind that they're always executed synchronously in the tests only. And basically what you need to test with the Queueables is the whole functionality of them, and doesn't matter if they're going to be instantiated or not, because usually it's not that relevant for the execution, okay? Because you know if that's a Queueable, if it implements Queueable interface, then of course it's going to be executed. Of course it's going to be instantiated as a Queueable. This is not a question. The question is, does your Queueable does what it needs to be doing, right? So you can even basically just run this whole execute method itself and pass null inside. That would also be enough to test the logic behind your Queueable. All right, so we covered basically everything you can do about Queueables. Now, my quiz to you is to go write the simplest Queueable that will insert an account into the system, and then write a test for this Queueable. And then write your code in the comments, and I'm gonna check if the code is correct. Okay, I'm gonna read all the comments. I'm gonna give you the good feedback. So this is all you need to know about Queueables. Use them, use an Apex, And if you want to know more about integrations, which is kind of the whole application of Queueables, then join my upcoming cohort on integrations in 8 weeks. The same way I've been teaching you here on the YouTube channel, I personally live will teach you all topics about integrations. They're very easy to understand. They're just you just need to spend 1-2 hours per week, and in 8 weeks you're gonna know everything about integrations, as you know everything about Queueables. Hopefully by this time. Thank you so much for joining. Like, comment. See you in the next one.